Welcome to Money Making Conversation. I'm your host, Rashawn McDonald. It is time to start reading other people's success stories. And like I always say every week, start writing your own. I always tell you, if you have gifts, lead with your gifts. You have passion, lead with your passion. And don't let your age, friends, family, or coworkers stop you from planning or living your dreams. On Money Making Conversation, I have a lot of interviews with celebrities, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and people I like to call industry decision makers. My next guest is Gina Yashere. Gina is releasing her first book, the memoir, Cack-Handed. The British comedian of Nigerian heritage is the co-creator, co-executive producer, writer, and actress in the CBS hit series Bob Hearts Abishola. Her book, Cack-Handed, chronicles her odyssey, a journey. We can use the other term because she's funny, and we're going to talk about her humor to America and breaking into Hollywood. And this lively and humorous memoir, and this, I want to say, is also informative. We should put that in there because it talks about history. Gina Yashere has appeared on countless television shows, both in the UK and the US. She's on her way to being one of the great stars from Britain. And guess what? We share something. She performed on Def Comedy Jam and is the only British comedian to perform on Def Comedy Jam. I also performed on Def Comedy Jam. Please welcome to Money Making Conversation, Gina Yashere.
Nice to meet you, Rashawn.
How you doing, my friend? Let's start with the name. Let's start with the names because that means, my name's Rashawn, and as I was coming up through the business, I had so many people saying my name different, and sometimes I let that slide because I just wanted stage time. I wanted somebody to let me in the front door. So if you call me Rue, Russian, Rasheen, I went with it, And then it came to a point where Rashawn was my name, and I held to that, and then I corrected people. Talk about your journey with your last name, and also because I know it's important to talk about that because people don't understand that it comes with respect. It comes with also statue. Because once people start saying it right, that means you're elevating your game. Talk about your last name.
Exactly. Obviously, my name is Nigerian. My parents are from Benin City in Nigeria. And my name is Yashere, and that's how it's pronounced, Yashere. And it's actually spelt Iyashere. But when I started doing comedy, they kept mispronouncing the name and pronouncing the I, which is almost silent. Mm-hmm. So I dropped the I from my name. So
wow.
The Yashere, because the I is almost is Yashere, the I is silent. So I dropped the I to help people pronounce it properly. And they still mispronounce it for a long time. I get called Yashir, Yashu, so I have to I've got this thing now. I go, it's Yashere. Think Yash. Hooray! And people, so I can tell who has done their research before the show when they pronounce my name correctly. You did good, Rashawn. You did good.
I like that. Yashere! I like that. Yashere! I like that. It's almost like cheering your name because
exactly.
You are a breath of fresh air. You are a breath of fresh air. And we want to talk about a couple of things. We want to talk about because I was a sitcom writer. I did, of course, I broke in with Steve Harvey and Me and the Boys on ABC. Then I did Robert Townsend Parenthood and Sister with the twins, Tia and Tamara Mowry.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
And then Jamie Foxx series. And I also did Monique series, The Parkers. And so I wanted to do this interview because of the fact that I felt we related a lot, but you just came from British and you have a Nigerian background, but we are both people of color. Which means that we also experience racism, also people passing over, ignoring our talents. Talk about your journey a little bit from the writing side, the sitcom side, to get your story, your show, that you're co-executive producer, that you co-created on the air on CBS.
Yeah, the thing is, I never considered myself a TV writer. I was like, I'm a stand-up comic. That's what I do. That's what I love. That's what I'm going to do forever. And I was hoping to become successful as that, hugely successful. I'm successful as a stand-up comic. I have been for quite a while. But that was all I wanted to do. I've never been crazy ambitious.
Right.
My dream was to be the best friend on someone else's sitcom and use that stardom to sell out bigger comedy clubs and arenas. And that's all I wanted to do.
Right.
People were offering me gigs for years to write on TV shows. And I was like, nope, I don't want a day job. I don't want to work for anybody else. I like working for myself. And I'd heard horror stories of the politics and things that go on in writers' rooms. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I want no parts of that. So I avoided writing on a TV show from all my career. This show came out of the blue. I just got a call out of the blue from Chuck Lorre. My agent got a call saying, Chuck Lorre of Big Bang Theory, Two and a Half Men, Mike and Molly, Kaminsky, Sheldon. He wants to meet you. And I was like, okay. And I was living in New York at the time, very happily doing my stand-up. I lived in LA for a few years, struggled to make money. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to New York because as a stand-up comic, I can make a living in New York. I'm going to New York. So I was living happily in New York for 6 years, had no plans to come back to Los Angeles. So I had this meeting. I flew over to LA to meet Chuck. I mean, originally I was like, well, they're flying me first class, right? I've just come off a long tour. They just fly me first class. And my agent was like, they don't fly people first class because it's just for meeting. And I was like, well, then I'm not going.
There you go.
So basically, I knew my worth from day one. I was like, if they really want to meet me, I've Googled Chuck Lorre, I've Googled Warner Brothers, I see how much money they got. They could afford a first class ticket. So I held out for that.
Love it.
And they did. They flew me first class for this meeting, and I walked into a meeting with Chuck Lorre, and basically he was like, I'm trying to make this show. I love Billy Gardell, who I made Mike and Molly with. I want to do another show with him. But this time I want the female protagonist to be a Nigerian woman.
Wow.
And obviously we're three white guys because it was Chuck Lorre, Eddie Gorodetsky, and Al Higgins, who are his main two collaborators on a lot of his stuff. And he was like, we're three white guys. We need you to sort of consult on all things African. Now, in my head, I was like, what? I was not feeling it at all. I was very suspicious. I was like, this feels exploitative. I've had ideas of mine stolen before. So I was not into it at all. But in the room, I was like, okay, interesting. Sounds interesting. Let me think about it. And I left and I called my agent and I was like, I don't want to do this. This sounds weird to me. They want me to consult on all things African. It sounds weird. Sounds racist. Don't want to do it. But basically, I have friends and family who will call me up and tell me when I'm being an idiot. And my brother called me from London and screamed at me for 2 hours. My best friend called me from London, screamed at me for another 2 hours. I'm like, this is an opportunity. You complain about the industry and how you're not authentically portrayed. And now you've got an opportunity to do this and you're turning it down. And I was like, you know what? You're right. So I stayed in a room with Chuck and Al and Eddie, and we knocked out this pilot for the show. And I said to them, if I'm doing the show, it's going to be authentic. We want Nigerian actors to play a lot of the roles, because when you watch TV and movies with Africans, the accents are always wrong. America seems to see Africa as a country and not a continent.
Yes.
There's lots of different countries, different languages, different religions, different traditions, different styles of dress, different everything. So I was like, if we're going to do this, I want it to be authentic. I'm going to pick the tribe. I'm going to pick the language. I'm going to make sure the actors, at least most of the actors, are authentic, so we get that vibe, so Nigerians can watch it and enjoy it and know that there's a Nigerian behind the scenes making sure.
I love it, Gina. Love it.
Years as a stand-up, I knew how to build the characters. I knew where the jokes were, and basically the rest of it, I picked up and learned as much as I could along the way, and that's how I got into it.
We will be right back with more money-making conversations with your host, Rashawn McDonald. Welcome back to Money Making Conversations with your host, Rashawn McDonald.
I'm talking to Gina Yashere. She's the co-creator, co-executive producer of this hit CBS series, Hearts Abishola. Now, I'm going to just tell you right now, being in a writer's room with sitcoms, and you were not wrong in your feelings. Somebody comes in, they're white, and they're telling you they want you to be the official guide or voice for their African Nigerian character. Right there, I'm like, really? Okay, who is this a joke? Really? So I felt but see, they were right too, because they said, well, go back and ask more questions, because this is, Chuck Lorre. Big Bang Theory. The guy is super rich. We all know that. Okay. And so
he's a genius. He's an absolute genius.
And so he really is. And that's just 2.5 Men, just a number of series he's done over the years, because Bob Lorre has been around the longest I've been doing sitcoms back in 1992. I've been writing those sitcoms. So when the show Hearts Abishola came about and you did the pilot, did you ask for any additional writers of color on staff, or how did that work out?
Oh, absolutely. I said to them, look, here's the thing. you've discovered me, but there's a lot of me's out there.
Wow.
And if we're going to make this show authentic, we can't be having a room full of the same old white guys that you've been working with for years.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure we got black writers in the room. But what I circumvented the normal way of trying to force them to take on black writers. What I would do was, obviously I'm a stand-up comic, so I'd book a comedy club and I'd be headlining. And I put my black friends on the shows and then invite Chuck and the guys to come to the shows.
Yes, yes.
So I invited them shows, and I didn't tell my friends what I was doing because I didn't want them to be nervous. And I'd just go, yeah, just come and open this show for me. I'm headlining. Come and do 20 minutes up in front of me. So I invited my friends onto the show and put them on the shows. And then I invited Chuck and Al and Eddie to my comedy shows. Mm-hmm. And whenever they went, oh, we like that person. She's very funny. We really liked her. And I go, we're really good because she also writes.
I love you.
So I then set up meetings between these comedians that they liked and them. And that's how I got black writers on the show. So I got Gloria Bigelow, who was a stand-up comic in LA. That's how I got her on the show. I put her on my comedy night. They liked her. I was like, well, she writes. And I put them together. They had a meeting. They loved her. And now she has been a writer from day one on the show. And that's how we did. And then we went out and looked for young Nigerian writers and young black writers to put in the room. So that's, I insisted that the room has to reflect the show. And they were open to it. Which is fantastic. I don't want to be the only black writer in the room fighting. I need other black writers and I need women as well. I need a nice mixed room. And that's what we did. So I'm very proud of that.
Hey, Gina, people need to understand the process that you're going through. And being a person who's involved in sitcoms, right there, it can lead to stupid jokes. It can move to, I remember when Steve Harvey was doing sitcom, Me and the Boys on his first sitcom, for some reason, whenever he would just let out a loud scream, then the audience in the stands would laugh. And so the writers in the room suddenly would create moments. Won't you scream here? Won't you scream here? He said, why? Because the audience laughs. He said, that's not me. That was just a moment that happened. And so people you need, and plus I love the fact, Gina, that you said, hey, I want more than my voice, because sometimes you don't want to be the person that leads everybody down this one line and then you become an expert when you're really not. You're just a talented person who lives this particular life and you need support. And that's what the writer's room is about, especially in sitcoms, because it's usually about just give people background information by 10 to 12 writers in a sitcom room. You will write a script. And you may think that's an Emmy-winning script. You give that script to the writer's room, and the only thing that's probably left on that script is the name of the script and your name. Am I right, Gina?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've written stuff, and then we'll go back in, and it may change 100%.
But that's the whole part about about bringing a versatile talent like you on, because making that transition from a stand-up comic to a writer, and because the money's good, everybody. I'm just to let you know. You get health benefits. And I remember the first time I saw my check, I showed it to my wife. She said, you getting paid all that? And I was just a staff writer. I came on board as an executive story editor. You know that check's nice. That was back in 92. Okay, that check was way nice back in 92. It's way better now. Yeah. And so that's why really you might see the people in front of the cameras working, but sometimes the writers and the producers behind the cameras are actually making more money than the actors in front of the camera. Talk about that whole awakening.
So I had no idea. So, but originally they brought me in as a consultant. I was just going to be a consultant. Mm-hmm. And a couple of days in, Chuck was like, you know what? You can't just be a consultant. We need you to help us write this show. So they bumped me up to co-creator because I'd created the characters. I told them what the characters were going to be about, what they were going to do. So I literally created all the characters based on, so they kind of knew we can't do this without Gina. So they bumped me up to co-creator and producer. And so, when those checks started coming, I was like, oh my God, these white boys have been earning all this money all this time. What have I been doing? Yes. Wasting my life with this stand-up stuff. Yes.
But we laugh, but that's true.
I wrote myself in as an actor.
Because we're not only talking about that, but we're talking about you got a separate check when you wrote a script. Now, I know back in the day, it was $16,000 per script. I don't know what it is now, but I'm pretty sure it's more than $16,000 per script.
Yeah, I mean, and the checks just keep coming in. I've never seen anything like it. So obviously, I get a check as a writer, producer.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I get an extra check as a co-creator.
Yes.
Then I also, because I'm a comedian and I'm a performer, I wrote myself in as an actor. Because I've always wanted to be the best friend on someone else's sitcom. So when we started writing it, I was like, I think Abishola needs a best friend. What do you think, guys? I think she needs a confidant. And I created this character. They didn't know I was creating it for myself.
Right.
I created this character. So, you got all those checks plus the repeat fees, during the pandemic. When there was not a lot of material because a lot of shows got shut down, our show got repeated a lot. And these checks just kept coming in. And I
mailbox money. Come on now.
My days. Oh, my days. I'm like, this is madness.
Let's go back to my favorite part of your career, stand-up comedy.
Oh, yeah.
My degree is in mathematics. Okay, I graduated with a degree. You're an engineer. So, like I said, I know we've never met, Gina, but I just feel that we have such a bond because we journey. I come from a big family, 6 sisters, 2 brothers, Houston, Texas. And your book, Cack-Handed, talks about Nigeria, and it talks about polygamy. It talks about the British rule. It talks about how people are considering what you're doing as being sinful or hellacious, living a lifestyle of polygamy. But talk to about how that really was an advantage and also a sense of royalty. If my family, my mom and dad, especially my dad, was in Nigeria having 6 sisters and 2 sons, he was in great shape. 3 sons, he was in great shape.
Yeah, I mean, obviously polygamy was widely practiced. My grandfather had many wives and many children, and it was a matter of survival. It was a matter of keeping a closeness in the family. The whole family lived on 1 compound, and that's how it was. And it wasn't seen as sinful till white people came over and were like, what you're doing is wrong, it's sinful, and praying to these deities, you're going to worship this white God and this white Jesus, and basically force their religion and their lifestyle and their beliefs on the African people. And basically a lot of our stuff got sort of watered down and lost over the years. And to a certain point, we've forgotten some of our original, traditions because it got beaten and stolen from us, So that was where my mother came from that. My mother's father, she had lots of brothers and sisters from various wives of her father. And all the women lived on a compound. Now, it's not always happy, love and happiness, because my mother's mother was poisoned by one of the other wives because there was some jealousy. There's a hierarchy. My mother's mother was the first wife, and so she was top of the hierarchy and was prone to resentment from the other wives.
Right.
It was like an episode of Dynasty or something. It's like a real soap opera happening. But that was the tradition, and that was the life that my mum came from. But as a daughter, which was kind of the patriarchy in Nigeria is very strong. So as a daughter, a lot of the time the daughters weren't always educated. They were groomed for motherhood and wifedom. But because my mother was keenly intelligent and her father was a well-traveled businessman, he was traveling all over Europe, traveling over the Americas, doing business. So he was quite an open-minded and a well-traveled guy. And he chose to educate my mother because you could see that my mother was extremely intelligent and sent her to really good schools, and she was educated. And my mother became one of the youngest headmistresses, school principals in Nigeria. She was a school principal before she was 24 years old.
Right.
So she was highly educated, and eventually she ended up coming to England to further her studies. And it was in England that she met my father.
But basically, she was kind of like forced to go over there, right? When she was kind of kicked out.
Her mother was killed by the other wives.
Yes.
We will be right back with more money-making conversations with your host, Rashawn McDonald. Welcome back to Money Making Conversations with your host, Rashawn McDonald.
What I want to make sure people understand is that cack-handed is a word for clumsy or awkward. She's left-handed. That's what cack means left in the British terminology. So what word are we leading with? Is we leading with the word awkward tied to cack? Are we leading the word clumsy tied to cack? Or is just fish out of water? Which one of those terms is?
There are so many meanings for the book. So as you said, cack-handed is a old British word for left-handed. Also means clumsy and awkward, which I don't believe we are. I think we're living in a right-handed world. So we're perceived as clumsy. If I'm at a bar and I'm next to you and I'm talking and I'm gesticulating with my left hand, I'm going to knock over your drink because you've put your drink on the right hand side of your body, which is your dominant hand. My left hand is my dominant hand. I'm going to knock your drink over. And then you're going to call me clumsy, but it's not. It's a right-handed world, and I'm just clumsy in it because everything is catered for right-handers. Hence, that's why the title of the book is that, because it encompasses various aspects of my life and my journey.
Wow, you're amazing. I want to wrap up by asking a couple of more questions. One,
Sure.
why did you write the book? Because it's a memoir, and
Yes.
a memoir is usually told, you want people to be motivated by your story, which I am motivated by your story. But why did you write the book? And also become relatable. I felt a lot of your story was relatable. Like, because in the beginning, we are built. Talk about the importance of the memoir, and also talk about how timely this book is, because it also is a history lesson book. It walks through the path of how basic you can say that, Nigeria was undermined and basically robbed, and the jewelry and the success and the wealth was brought into British museums. So talk about that and help us out as I recommend people to pick up this book, because it is an amazing book, Cack-Handed.
Yeah, I mean, why I wrote the book, originally it started off as just on Instagram, there was a hashtag Throwback Thursdays where you post old pictures. Mm-hmm. And I was posting old pictures and writing the story behind the picture. So I post the picture and write an elaborate post explaining the history behind the picture. And people were really interested in it and saying, oh my God, your stories are so good. Why don't you write a book? So I started keeping those posts in a folder. And eventually a literary agent saw my post and contacted me and says, you need to write a book. So I kept the post and like, well, maybe one day in the future I'll write a book, but I never really considered that this would happen so soon. So that's how the universe worked. And I wanted to talk about my history because people don't seem to realize that the UK started slavery. Imperialism. The United Kingdom ruled most of the planet at one point.
Yes, it
so
did.
People think that American racism is the be-all and end-all of racism. No, Americans learned that from the Brits. The British did their slavery slightly different from America in that I used to do a routine on stage where I did the British did a equivalent of, the Americans did the equivalent of robbing someone's house, as in stealing people from Africa and bringing them back home to their own house. The Brits did the equivalent of stealing stuff, but keeping it in other people's houses. So
Yes.
went to Africa and stole black people. They didn't bring them all to England. They hid their dirty doings and put the black people on Caribbean islands for the sugar plantations and on Caribbean islands. And that's where all those black people who come from those islands are descendants of slaves. So when African Americans, there's been a discord for a long time between African Americans and people coming from Africa or people coming from the islands. Our history is almost identical. Black people in the Caribbean suffered exactly the same cruelty, exactly the same awfulness that they did on American land, on plantations within America. So what I wanted to do was, when I wrote the book, I started with the history of Africa, Nigeria in particular, and the history of what Britain did to Africans and how they spread black people all over the world. That it's not, the Belgians were the terrible slavers, the Dutch, the South African, all of it. So I just wanted to show the commonality between black people wherever you end up in the diaspora. We've all had very similar experiences. Our accents might be different. We might speak different languages, but the experiences are very similar. So that's part of the history of the beginning when I explain that. And then when I talk about my upbringing in England, I was also England. People think, oh, England, it's so genteel. Racism doesn't. England, and well, you're now discovering it with what happened with, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Mm-hmm. But racism is just as prevalent in Europe as it is in America. I spent my life running away from skinheads, being abused racially at work, being pulled over by the police all the time for no reason. The only reason that less black people die at police hands in England is because our police do not carry guns on a routine basis. Mm-hmm. They only carry guns for particular incidents where they are then have given special permission to have. They do not carry guns on a daily basis. And that is the only reason The black people are not dying at the hands of police at the same numbers in England as America. The only reason the police in America are just as racist as the ones in England, just as racist as America. So I wanted to cover some of that in my book. I mean, there's obviously humor. I'm a comedian. I want to make you laugh. So I'm also talking, injecting quite a lot of humor in the book. But I wanted Americans reading the book to see that black people have much more in common all over the world than we've been led to believe.
You are amazing. Gina Yashere, her book, Cack-Handed, is a memoir about her life, her journey. She's also CBS star. I'm gonna move you up to star of Hearts Abishola. Come on. She's a comedian, writer, co-producer, co-creator. Thank you for taking the time to come on Money Making Conversation, Gina. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you.
All right. Fellow Def Jam, Comedy Jam members, you keep winning now, okay?
Let's do it.
Okay, if you want to hear or see any of my interviews on moneymakingconversation.com, please go to moneymakingconversation.com. Thank you.